Sonic on the Nintendo Game Boy Advance. Oh man, now that's a sentence, I'll tell you that. While not surprising that Sonic since the early to mid 2000s was jumping around to different consoles, whether it was the Nintendo GameCube with Sonic Adventure 2 Battle and Adventure DX, or on the Xbox 360 with Sonic Unleashed and yeah, the handheld setting was kinda different for the Blue Blur Speed if you look back into its own history. I mean, back in the 90s, there were the Game Gear games with Sega publishing and developing them for Sonic with games like Sonic Chaos, and there were other handheld systems like the Neo Pocket that gave people Sonic Pocket Adventure, but it wasn't really the same in terms of reception as opposed to Nintendo's Game Boy and Game Boy Color. Yeah, that hunky brick sold units, and it wasn't stopping there when it unveiled the latest version of the system back in the day known as the Game Boy Pocket. Yeah, this thing also exists, but we don't really talk about it. 2001 though, now that's a completely different story here, as it was the debut year of the Game Boy Advance, baby, and with this purple handheld system, you just about had everything you wanted from a handheld. Sure, the Game Boy Color was still around at this time and providing its fair share of high quality handheld gaming, but this thing, oh man, I had to pull his junk out and slam it on the table to say, yeah, I'm the boss now. The GBA simply had the better perks for a handheld system at the time, whether it was 30-bit to sprite work, better audio and animation, and of course a catalog of games to boot, from Mega Man Zero to Battle Network to Legend of Zelda Minish Cap and Metroid Fusion in between, and of course you can't forget the latest Pokemon generation at the time being Pokemon Ruby and Pokemon Sapphire. But under all these set of games, yeah, you best believe that Sonic saw no exception to not be a part of all of it, especially since Nintendo kinda bailed the Blue Blur out after the failure of the Sega Dreamcast. Yeah, the turn of the millennium certainly went off to a great start if you asked me. Thus enter the Sonic GBA games here, a set of games that the more I look back at them, the more I kinda realize how fairly well received they were at the time, and even now when you talk to anybody on the Sonic community. Also, I said fairly well received, okay? I don't wanna look at you again. In any case, the Sonic GBA games collectively were a great catalog of Sonic games and easily one of the most memorable that Sonic has had to date. Yeah, of course we can't deny that Nintendo DS games are also just as noticeable, especially with Sonic Rush being a solid Sonic platformer for the system back in 2005, followed by Sonic Rush Adventure in 2007, as well as Sonic Chronicles being well, Sonic Chronicles. Nah, but before you talk about those games, you gotta head back to the origin story, starting with Sonic's first ever GBA title called Sonic Advance, and already they started things off with a really loud bang. Released in 2001 during the first years of the GBA, Sonic Advance was definitely a first impression to the modern 2D Sonic style. While Nintendo and Sega were working out their dealings to give Sonic a chance to thrive on the Nintendo GameCube, such as what we saw with Sonic Adventure 2 Battle, Sega also decided to hire the developers DIMS to work out on some really cool ideas for Sonic to be on the GBA, resulting in a grand old time by the time this game released on store shelves. And listen, first impressions are always first impressions, as easily the sprite work for Sonic Advance here is phenomenal and something that will stand to the testament of time, as of course it would be used for Sonic Advance 2 and 3 as well as Sonic Battle later on, but also one that was used for so many fan projects back in the day like Sonic Final Fantasy X and Super Mario Bros. Z. Man, you just had to be there cause that was the good shit. Reception-wise, Sonic Advance here was low-key perfect as a handheld Sonic game. It handled the elements of the classic games back on the Sega Genesis while modernizing it with a look and feel to it, such as using the modern Sonic and the gang as a basis for sprite work design. With its level design being as simplistic but also unique for the time, Sonic Advance as a whole was a welcome addition to Sonic's lineup during the early 2000s, which of course made no exception when Sonic Advance 2 rolled up into store shelves just about a year or so later. Now this one is easily one of my favorites of the trilogy, as it prioritized speed and momentum more so than exploration and platforming. And yes, I said the bad Sonic word, but hear me out. While there was some exploration in the sense of getting the special ring, Sonic Advance 2 just felt like a handheld game that was meant to be short, quick, but also fun at the same time. And Sonic never felt so fast, unlike here compared to Sonic Advance 1, and even the console games, as the animation for this demonstrated that if Sonic wanted to go fast, oh, he would go fast and then some, holy hell. Sonic Advance 2 was also the introduction to Cream the Rabbit and making her playable, adding another amazing character into the roster and allowing some additional fun to be had alongside the usual Sonic trio and Amy. Though honestly I never understood why Amy was a secret unlockable in this game, but you know what? It is what it is. I don't think I'm ever gonna recover from that 100% completion. But of course with Sonic Advance 2 came rolling Sonic Advance 3, and this one was alright. I mean, yeah, based on my review video for this one, it does say that it wasn't my favorite out of the Sonic Advance trilogy here, as there were a lot of negative things I can point out with this one, but like the previous two games, it wasn't all that bad, and hell, replaying it now feels way more enjoyable now knowing what I can do to make this game more fun. While optimizing for longer base stage layouts and more of that classic feel in terms of exploration, while also bringing in some of the speed from Sonic Advance 2, it also had the team up mechanic plays into it that I quite like also, unlike before, though it's still not as great as Sonic Heroes, but it still provided a unique flavor for this entry particularly. Like, there were so many cool combinations to choose from between Sonic and the gang here, and playing around with the level design, and I overall liked the feel this game had, even though the overworld stuff, yeah, it was too much filler and kind of ruined the pacing of this game if you ask me, but otherwise it was still a really great time. But the stage themes, the boss fights, the music, and the overall feel to this one really felt the most modern it could get for a 2D modern Sonic game at the time, and despite me saying that there are some bad things about this Sonic Advance game, this was still something to be had regardless. Plus, I mean, I wish they could have given a Sonic Advance 4, especially now that they have Sonic Superstars, but hey, let's just see how this plays out, okay? Still though, while the Advance games were great collectively, don't get me wrong, there was still one small factor missing from them in order to make them a little bit more memorable, so to speak. Like beating the crap out of each other. Sonic Battle, ladies and gentlemen. Oh, now we're definitely in the deep end of the rabbit hole now. A game that released before Sonic Advance 3 in North America on January of 2004, while Sonic Advance 3 released on July that same year. This game was like the attempt of doing something new for Sonic in an effort to see what could work in the future, and a fighting-based game surely was something unique. Now, it wasn't necessarily an unfamiliar concept to them, given that Sega has worked on fighting games in the past, such as Virtua Fighter, as well as the arcade classic Sonic the Fighters that was then localized in the Gems collection back in 2005, so Sonic Battle was kind of more or less trying that style out while also using the sprite work that they were already familiar with the Sonic Advance games. Also, this was like the game that gave us all the badass moves Sonic was pulling off in Super Mario Bros. Z, like, need I say more? And truth be told, while only playing a little bit of this game for footage sake, I genuinely enjoyed my experience with this one. Yeah, the playstyles for each character may be repetitive if you just want to breeze through the game, but if you just want to explore and see the animation and controls that this game does have, then it was a welcome addition to the catalog of Sonic games at the time, especially with how this was emphasizing combat more so than the standard 2D Sonic fun. Now, can you even imagine if they combined the elements of the combat from Sonic Battle and the speed of Sonic in general and form it into one large game? Man, that would be awesome. Oh wait, they already did that shit. It's called Sonic Unleash. Of course, besides all that single player fun, Sonic Battle was mostly a fighting game at the end of the day, so that meant you needed more than one player, dummy. Now, this is something that I think puts a detriment to Sonic Battle's replayability, as this game was meant to be multiplayer, but the GBA needed a link cable in order to do all that kind of stuff, and even if you were to buy that link cable at the time, then really that was all for trading and battling in Pokemon, people, not so much for a game that has Sonic and Shadow throwing hands, although that Rockstar still really looks cool today. Nah, this one was more of a casually fun experience, and the story is one that I like the most out of the GBA titles, since it does feel like a continuation off of Sonic Adventure 2, as well as Sonic Heroes, and I kinda like the interactions the gang have from here from time to time. Though of course, this is as far as I'm really gonna speak about the story and the rest of the content here, because I really do want to make this into a review like I did with the Sonic Advance trilogy, but I will say that this one is not as bad as some make it out to be, and one that I think holds a reasonable and solid reputation of being playable. Unlike this one where, for fuck's sakes, man, you just don't know when to quit. Wait. Before we dive into that one, may I interest you in some Sonic Pinball Party? Yeah, I kinda have to mention this one since, you know, this technically counts as a Sonic GBA game. Now, 2006 was a really funny year for Sonic the Hedgehog, where, to be short, sweet, and to the point here, Sonic died and nearly tanked his entire franchise along with it. Got it? Okay, good. Besides the horrible mess that was, of course, Sonic 06 in hindsight, which was an anniversary title for the latest console generations at the time, Sega and Nintendo decided to continue promoting the efforts of the 15th anniversary of Sonic was, well, by porting the original Sonic the Hedgehog on Genesis over to the Game Boy Advance. And the result of that? Oh brother, I ain't gonna sugarcoat it. Like I talked about it back in my video on Terrible Sonic Remasters, I won't really say too much about this game again besides calling it one big ol' mess and then some, but hey, maybe things could be different. Oh nah, who am I even kidding? This is Sonic Genesis on the GBA, this thing reeks of sheer disappointment. However, unlike that video, this time around I did decide to dive a little deeper into the game and try to at least get past Marble Garden Zone and get the full experience of this, but yeah, no, I wasn't really having it with this one. I'm gonna be completely real with you all. Like, we get it, controls are stiff, the music is weird, Sonic is too in your face and I can't see anything from the sides. Like, the list can go on and on and on. And again, this game just didn't work as a cool anniversary title. And bottom line, it's a waste of your time. So here's some more Sonic Pinball Party to compensate. But that's it for the Sonic GBA games. Pretty quick and easy, wasn't it? Besides stressing that individually, I would like to give these games more attention down the line in the form of reviews, not you, or that despite already making reviews for them in the past, the whole purpose really of this video was just a highlight of this era of Sonic back in the early 2000s. Despite what did went on in the console setting, either on the Nintendo GameCube or elsewhere, Sonic on handheld was rather a comfortable ride and one that felt like things were looking up for the blue blur speed, even if what others have to say about this era particularly. Yeah, was this the era that also around the time that Sonic would meet its decline with Sonic 06 onwards and thus form the Dark Era? Well, yeah, it is, but I'm not really ready to talk about that yet. Yeah, definitely not ready. But with the Sonic Advance Trilogy and Sonic Battle specifically, we just saw a side of Sonic that felt fresh, exciting, and fun, while also allowing that similar feeling of the older games to thrive as well. It was like a perfect combination between the 2D and the 3D style of Sonic, if you ask me, without so much having to rely on classic Sonic to do all that kind of work. Which is something that I wish Sega can do nowadays by either porting over the Advance Trilogy as a collection, or even on GBA Online for the Nintendo Switch. But then again, Sonic Genesis on GBA still exists, and we do have Sonic Origins and Origins Plus, so yeah, I think I want to hold on to this idea for a little longer, I'm gonna be honest here. And so with that, let me know what your thoughts are on the Sonic GBA games, as well as comment down below which sort of Sonic games you want me to talk about next in terms of consoles or handheld settings, because I'm kind of thinking of doing the Wii Sonic games because I really remember growing up with those games and I kind of want to talk about those. But if this video kind of gets, you know, I don't know, 10k views or like 1k likes, I'll definitely consider it. Nah, I'll probably be like the next video I'll do in terms of Sonic, for sure. If that happens, of course. Anyways, I'm heading off now. Gotta head back to Mega Man X for the time being, as well as Pokemon, because that Scarlet and Violet DLC is fast approaching, ladies and gentlemen, so if you excuse me. Oh yeah, this video is over, by the way. Roll the outro.